On our daughter Delia's 5th birthday. Flora posted a group photo on Moments with the caption, "The child was pestering for her dad before going to bed." And her wonderful dad immediately put down his work and rushed over. The man lying on the bed with her in the photo was my husband Morton. I looked at the message I received 10 minutes ago. "There's something up at the company tonight. You and Delia don't have to wait for me." I gave it a like. And then dialed the number of my divorce lawyer. Hello everyone. Welcome to my channel. Subscribe us to read wonderful novels every day. Now the story begins. It was already 2 a.m. when Morton came back. Sensing the glaring light, I covered my daughter's eyes right away. Morton leaned against the door frame and said, "Honey, I'm back. Wake Delia up. I'll accompany her to celebrate her birthday." In the past I cared a lot about these family rituals. Whether it was birthdays, festivals, anniversaries or kindergarten activities, I would ask Morton to participate as much as possible. I didn't want Delia to be like me, only able to see her dad through video calls. On the phone. But now I adjusted the quilt and said in a flat tone, "No need." A flash of impatience crossed Morton's face as he said, "Jessica, I just went over there to coax John to sleep. Don't misunderstand. I didn't dare to tell you the truth. Precisely because you're always so suspicious." I wasn't misunderstanding. And from now on I wouldn't be suspicious either. "If you have nothing else to do, go to your own room. Don't disturb Delia's sleep. She has to go to school tomorrow." Hearing my reply, Morton sneered and said, "Whatever. But don't complain later that I'm absent from Delia's growth." I turned around to turn off the light and gently patted my daughter, who had been slightly disturbed, in my arms. Absence or not, it didn't matter anymore. After all, Delia's birthday wish this year. I don't want to see Dad anymore. The next morning, instead of going out directly after breakfast, as he used to, Morton sat there watching the morning news. When he was about to go out, he suddenly picked up the keys, walked over and touched Delia's head, saying, "Dad will send you to school today." He said this to our daughter, but his eyes were fixed on me. 2 years ago, when Delia first started kindergarten, Morton picked her up and sent her to school every day. But after Flora came, he started going out earlier and earlier, saying that the morning meeting time at the company had been advanced, and he didn't have time to send the child. I always believed him until 3 months ago, when Delia transferred to another kindergarten. I saw at the kindergarten gate that the man who should have been at the company bent down and carried a little boy out of the back seat. So it wasn't that he didn't have time to pick up and send our daughter. He just had more important things to do that night. We had a fierce argument. From the next day on, Delia never asked for her dad to send her to school again. Although I had decided to divorce, Morton was still Delia's father after all. After thinking for a moment, I didn't say no. The man's lips curved slightly, and he bent down to pick Delia up. When I opened the car door, I was stunned. The back seat was filled with things: an Ultraman water bottle, a wooden bow and arrow, a women's shawl. There was also a family photo hanging behind the seat. Noticing my gaze, Morton's face changed slightly as he said, "Flora hung this up casually. She said John would be happier seeing it. Don't lose your temper over such a trivial matter again. If it were in the past, I would definitely smash the family photo and then cry and question Morton about what Delia and I meant to him. But now I nodded and said the photo was taken." Well, Morton looked at me with a strange expression and asked, "Aren't you angry?" Maybe I should be angry, but somehow I felt nothing. I even felt like laughing. Could Morton, who was always known for his shrewdness, not see such clumsy tricks? He just didn't care. "Get in the car quickly. Delia will be late." Hearing my urging, Morton pursed his thin lips and opened the driver's door. Just as I was about to pick up Delia and get in the car, Morton's phone rang. I have a good dad. A good dad on the other end of the phone. The little boy was crying heartrendingly. Dad, where have you gone? Don't you want John and Mom anymore?" After hanging up the phone, Morton didn't even look at us. He quickly got into the car and said, "John is crying and looking for me. The driver will send you two today." The black Maybach drove away in a cloud of dust. Worried about Delia, I squatted down to comfort her. "Dad has something to do today. Next time when he's free, we'll send you to school together, okay?" A maturity beyond her age appeared on Delia's face. As she said, "Dad won't be free. He gives all his time to John and his mom." In the evening, Morton called and said, "Jessica, I'll be back late today. John is ill, okay?" I agreed so quickly that Morton's explanation got stuck in his throat. Thinking I was in a bad mood, there was dissatisfaction in his tone as he said, "Jessica, don't be in a temper." Then he hung up the phone. 10 minutes later, several text messages came in. "I'm really sorry. John has been very clingy to his dad recently. But he really shouldn't have left you and Delia. As soon as he received my call, I'll scold him. Don't be angry." There was also an emoji of covering the mouth and smiling at the end. It was Flora. These text messages were more like a declaration of war than an apology. I didn't have the energy to fight with her over a man, so I directly deleted and blocked her. Not long after, Morton called again. "Jessica, what on earth are you doing? Flora apologized to you and this is your attitude." I could faintly hear the sobbing of a woman and a child on the other end of the phone. I didn't say anything. After a long time, the man's deep voice sounded. "Jessica, how could you become like this? I'm so disappointed in you." It was Flora who provoked me first. But as soon as she cried, Morton would put all the blame on me, as if I were some kind of evil villain. When I got home, I started packing my luggage. When Morton called, I was consulting a lawyer. I learned that after the divorce, I could get at least 30% of the shares of company. And when the custody conditions of both parties are similar, the daughter will be given priority to the mother. The last bit of worry was gone. Bags, jewelry and toys that Delia liked. These were all to be taken away. When I received the last box, I was in a trance for a moment. My hands trembled slightly as I opened the wax-sealed box covered with dust. It was a box full of love letters from Morton, aged 17 to 22. I opened the top one. It started with, "Hello 27-year-old Jessica. I'm 17-year-old Morton. This is the first love letter I've written to you. According to our agreement, we'll open this letter together 10 years later. Surely we'll be married by then. And maybe we'll even have a lovely child." My phone rang. On the other end of the phone was the 27-year-old Morton. "Jessica, do you know that Flora has run away from home with the child? If anything happens to them, I won't let you go. I happen to see the end of the letter at this time. Who will always love, Jessica." My heart ached as if something had gently broken. I hung up the phone and threw the box into the fireplace. That night Morton didn't come back. I didn't desperately call him as I used to, crying and swearing that I wouldn't make things difficult for Flora anymore. My daughter didn't ask about her dad either. She just quietly took the photo of her and Morton. When I was packing, Morton and I thus fell into a cold war. Until a week later, when Delia's kindergarten needed a parental consent form to be signed which required face recognition. I called Morton but found that I had been blocked. Helpless, I had to take the consent form to his company to find him. I hadn't waited long when I saw a familiar figure enter Morton's office. The assistant pouring water beside me looked a bit guilty and said, "Sister-in-law, President Morton has given instructions that Sister Flora can enter and leave his office at will. This privilege of Flora, come to think of it, was actually caused by me. At that time I would always bring meals to Morton. The two of us would chat while eating, and the chat would last for an hour. Once Flora happened to come to see him, but was stopped by the assistant. When Morton sent me out after the meal, Flora and John were already shivering with cold, their lips turning white. That was the first time Morton showed me a cold face. He got very angry, saying that my bringing meals to him every day was a waste of his time. The assistant who stopped Flora was also fired. Since then, Everyone knew that Flora was the apple of Morton's eye. I never came to the company again. I smiled and nodded at the assistant. Then got up and walked straight towards the office. Morton was indeed having a meeting. He was a bit surprised to see me and asked, "Why are you here?" Flora was sitting on the armrest of his chair. And the two of them were so close that they were almost touching. Noticing my gaze, he seemed hesitant to speak and said, "Jessica, don't misunderstand. Flora happens to know a bit about this project." So I nodded and handed him the tablet saying, "Delia is going on a research and study activity and needs a parent's signature. You came just for this." "What else?" The man's aura turned cold, although I didn't know why. Based on my understanding of Morton, he was in a very bad mood now. Flora sneered and said, "What's so difficult about a signature, Morton? Miss Jessica just wants to make up with you. You've been staying at my place these days. You should go back and see Delia." Morton's frown relaxed. He threw the tablet on the coffee table and gave a playful smile, saying, "Jessica, you've learned to use the child as an excuse. Now apologize to Flora or I won't sign this." In the past, hearing such words would make me very angry. I would be angry that Morton didn't care about his own daughter. And even more angry that he did this for Flora. But now I wasn't angry with anyone. I was just thinking that if there was no parent's signature, Delia wouldn't be able to go on the research and study activity, and she would be disappointed. I looked at Morton and Flora, who was still sitting on the armrest of his chair, and left the office without looking back. At worst, I would tell the teacher that Delia didn't have a dad. I had just walked a few steps when a clear male voice sounded. "If Miss Jessica doesn't mind, perhaps I can do it for you." It was the man who had been in Morton's office just now. After all, I've been watching Miss Jessica's family affairs for so long. I then took a closer look at him. He was wearing a pure black suit, exuding a strong sense of abstinence. His eyebrows and eyes were cold, and he looked wealthy and noble. I directly handed him the tablet, and the authentication was quickly passed. 3 flamboyant words were written on the screen. The divorce agreement had been drawn up. I unilaterally ended this Cold War and asked Morton to come home. That night, when I went to the kindergarten to pick up Delia, his Maybach was already waiting in the pickup area. The car window rolled down, revealing Flora's smug smile in the passenger seat, saying, "Miss Jessica, you're here to pick up the child too. This is a prestigious kindergarten. How can you still be wearing last year's coat? Aren't you afraid that the child will be laughed at?" I ignored her and moved a little further away. Flora looked at the man in the driver's seat, with a look of grievance on her face, and said, "Morton, did I say something wrong again? Miss Jessica seems to be angry." Surprisingly, Morton didn't answer. He stared at my thin coat without moving, and said stiffly, "Jessica, it's windy outside. Get in the car first." I moved even further away. I don't know when it started, but we became more and more estranged. Even when he said a caring word, it seemed so forced. When we were almost at the gate, 2 children in the line started fighting. Frowning, I saw that one of them was Delia. I quickly ran over to pull them apart, and found that the other child in the fight was John. He was stunned when he saw me, then immediately sat on the ground and started crying loudly. "Why, Auntie hit me. It hurts so much." Morton and Flora also rushed over. Flora picked up her son, her face full of resentment, and said, "Jessica, even if you don't like me, you can't take it out on a child. It's just a fight between 2 kids. Do you have to be so excited?" Morton also looked at me with dissatisfaction, completely forgetting that Delia was his biological daughter. The teacher looked embarrassed and said, "Mom of Delia, Mom of John." The 2 children just saw Mr. Morton and both said he was their dad. They started arguing and then fighting. It was dismissal time, and there were parents all around, coming to pick up their children. What kind of thing is this? How can there be a fight over a dad? Could it be the original wife and the mistress? The man looks rich. Maybe the kid is just being vain and talking nonsense. Who knew? It just happened to be seen by the other child. Being money-worshipping at such a young age. I don't know how the family educates the child. John was still crying, hugging Morton's neck and constantly calling out Dad. And Elia, she just held my hand tightly, staring at Morton without blinking. The other children were also curious and said, "Uncle, whose dad are you exactly? Hurry up and say. People who wrongly claim someone as their dad have to apologize." Morton opened his mouth and said, "I'm at this moment." Flora gently pulled his sleeve, her eyes full of pleading. Almost instantly I understood that Morton was wavering, just like countless times before. As long as Flora spoke, Delia and I would become his second choice. I gritted my teeth and coldly reminded him, "Morton, your answer now will affect Delia for the rest of her life. Think it through before you speak." The man's body stiffened slightly. His lowered eyes betrayed no emotion, as he said in a voice that wasn't loud, but could be heard by everyone present, "I'm John's father. Little friend. Did you mistake me for someone else?" My heart tightened, as if it had been struck hard by a sledgehammer. The pain was so intense that I almost shed tears. This was our daughter. The onlooking parents started to blame Delia. "Little girl. Why are you wrongly claiming someone is your dad? And even hitting his real son? Yeah, the truth is out and you still don't apologize. No manners at all. Jealous of others being rich. And wanting to be a rich man's daughter. I guess her mom doesn't look like a nice person either. All dressed up and looking shady. Maybe she's up to no good." And deliberately taught her daughter to wrongly call someone dad. To find a sugar daddy. Morton, are you even human? Before I could finish, a sharp pain came from my palm. Delia bit her lower lip, her grip on my hand surprisingly strong. Her eyes quickly dimmed as she said, "Mom, forget it." Then she numbly bowed to Morton and said, "Uncle, I'm sorry. I mistook you for someone else in the dessert shop." I hugged my daughter with a heavy heart. "Delia, he's your father. Mom doesn't force you to love him. But I also don't want you to grow up with hatred." A calm, childish voice replied to me, "Mom, I don't have a dad. He admitted it himself. He's John's dad." I touched the divorce agreement in my bag and booked a flight to Hong Kong City for tonight. On my phone was an apology message from Morton. Sent 10 minutes ago. "Jessica. I'm sorry, but John comes from a single-parent family. In that situation just now I could only lie. I'll explain it clearly to the teacher tomorrow. I'll never let our daughter be wronged." This was the first time he apologized to me for something related to Flora. But unfortunately, I no longer needed it, and neither did Delia. One last trip back to pick up our documents and change of clothes, and we could bid farewell to this city completely. I thought no one was at home, but to my surprise, there were quite a few people in the living room. John was holding Delia's favorite toy, sitting on Delia's exclusive small sofa, and watching TV. Morton and Flora came out of the kitchen with dishes in their hands. They were both stunned when they saw Delia and me. I frowned. We weren't divorced yet, and he had already brought her here. Morton explained about what happened today. "Flora thought she should apologize to you. She was afraid you'd think it wasn't sincere. So she wanted to cook some dishes herself." "They're all your favorites," I sneered. "I don't dare to eat the food you two made." Morton, feeling guilty, rarely got angry. He said to Delia and John, "You two go play in the room for a while. Dad and Mom have something to talk about." As soon as the children entered the room, Flora came forward to apologize. Whether it was intentional or not, she stood in a row with Morton and said, "Miss Jessica, what happened today was all my fault. I blame myself for not correcting John in time. He's always thought Morton was his biological father. If you really mind, I'll take John and leave Sydney S. I'll never come back to bother you and Morton again." As she spoke, she started crying. I looked at the woman in front of me and remembered the first time we met. At that time her husband had just passed away. She was kneeling in front of us with her child, crying pitifully. Thinking about it now, perhaps Morton had fallen for her from that moment. A woman with raven black hair and red lips, kneeling gracefully in front of him, saying he was her reliance for the rest of her life. Who could resist that? I curled my lips, took out the divorce agreement and said, "You don't need to leave. I will Morton, let's get a divorce. After the divorce, you can be Flora's good husband and John's good father." Openly Morton looked at me with a gloomy face. His eyes dark and said, "Jessica, are you threatening me?" I nodded. "You can think of it that way." The man laughed out of anger and said, "Jessica, do you really think I'm afraid? I've told you so many times. Brother Juan is my childhood friend. When we were young, we swore that if one of us passed away, the other would take care of the family. Why are you so narrow-minded?" I still said indifferently, "Yes, I'm narrow-minded." "Mr. Morton, you're so magnanimous. Don't haggle with me. Sign the agreement." Quickly enraged by my indifferent attitude, Morton snatched the agreement. Didn't even look at it. Picked up a pen and signed his name. Then threw the papers at my feet and said, "Jessica, I signed it. What about you? Do you dare to divorce?" I picked up the agreement. Just as I was about to speak, John came running out of the room crying, "Why, Dad, Delia hit me." The blood stain on his face was extremely shocking. Morton glared at me, his eyes as if he wanted to devour me, and said, "Jessica, look at the good daughter you've raised." Delia also came out of the room and said, "Mom, I didn't hit him. He fell down by himself." Morton roared, "Delia, you've learned to lie. Apologize to John right now. Do you hear me?" Delia glanced at him but didn't answer. Seeing this, John cried even louder. "Why, Dad? It hurts so much." Morton looked at Delia coldly and said, "Delia, Dad doesn't like children who lie. You're really disappointing me." Delia was about to say something, but I stopped her and said, "Morton, there are surveillance cameras in our house. To find out who's lying, we just need to check the surveillance." Hearing this, Flora's eyes flickered with panic. Unusually, she tried to smooth things over and said, "Forget it. Kids fighting is normal. There's no need to check the surveillance. Our John is the older brother. It's okay to be hit by his sister a few times." "What do you mean, forget it? My daughter, Jessica's daughter, won't be wronged for no reason. You have to check the surveillance today." Seeing my insistence, Morton opened the door to the surveillance room. On the surveillance, it clearly showed that John had fallen down by himself. Flora kept trying to make excuses. "Morton, John is just a child. He was so scared that he had to lie. Maybe Delia has bullied him before. Otherwise he wouldn't act like this." But Morton ignored her and stared fixedly at the upper left corner of the surveillance screen. In the video, I threw a box into the fireplace. My movements crisp and without the slightest hesitation. Morton rushed over and grabbed my wrist. His eyes red-rimmed. "And Jessica, you burned it. How could you burn it?" I looked into Morton's eyes and said calmly, "It was crawled over by bugs. It was dirty, so I didn't want it and burned it. I'll take Delia back to Hong Kong City. I'll send you the agreement later." Seeing my expressionless face, Morton visibly panicked. He finally realized that I really wanted to divorce him. "I didn't really want to divorce. I thought you were just threatening me." Flora was equally flustered. The fake smile on her face could barely hold up. But she still forced herself to say, "Is Miss Jessica using the strategy of retreating to advance? Burning a box of worthless things? It doesn't seem to be worth much. Get out of the way." Flora fell to the ground looking at Morton in disbelief. John also burst into tears. "Why, Mom lied. Mom said that after driving them away, Dad would be mine alone. I did everything Mom told me to do. Why haven't they left?" Why, in an instant the man's face lost all its color. I didn't bother to watch their bickering. I picked up my daughter and walked out. If I didn't leave, the plane would be late in Hong Kong City. My mom was waiting for me at the airport with the driver and said, "I told you not to marry that poor guy long ago. With a mother like his. What kind of good person could he be?" I covered Delia's ears and said, "Mom, the child is here." My mom sighed. After all, she felt sorry for her daughter and said, "As long as you're home." Then with a loving face, she started to amuse her granddaughter. After resting for a few days, I took Delia to look for a new kindergarten. Finally, we settled on a private school near home. It did a great job of keeping information confidential and held many parent-child activities. When I signed and was about to leave, the kindergarten principal stopped us. "Miss Jessica, the child's father said he's on the way. There's an activity today. You can participate and have a look." Morton, I frowned. The words of refusal were on the tip of my tongue, when a male voice interrupted me. "The activities in this kindergarten are very interesting. Does Delia want to give it a try?" Outside the door was none other than Edward, whom I had met last month. Seeing my stunned expression, Edward waved his hand in front of my eyes. "What, don't you recognize the child's father?" After some explanation, I found out that Edward's information had been entered during the school roll connection. I felt a bit apologetic, but he waved it off. "It's nothing anyway. I'm not busy." I looked at his phone. That rang 10 times in 3 minutes. And didn't expose him. Today's activity was a parent-child sports meeting. Delia chose the 3-legged race and the relay race to participate in. She was screaming with joy on the playground, getting rid of the gloom of these past few days. I was cautious. During the break of the activity, I asked my mother to help me check Edward's identity, who knew that as soon as I sent his name and photo. My mother started laughing. "This is Edward family's kid. He used to snatch your toys when you were little. Have you forgotten?" Suddenly it dawned on me. I finally knew where the sense of familiarity with Edward came from. I grew up in Hong Kong City. I moved to City S with my parents after graduating from primary school, and rarely came back. Thinking carefully, I had seen Edward once at my grandfather's funeral a few years ago. After the activity, I took Delia home. As we were walking, Delia's face suddenly turned gloomy. I followed her gaze in the sunset. A familiar figure was standing in front of our house. It was Morton. He had chased us to Hong Kong City. It was as if nothing had happened. And he followed Delia and me around. He was everywhere, at the kindergarten, the mall, the dessert shop. Sometimes he would come up and say a few words. When he saw our impatient expressions, he would retreat back with a desolate look on his face. At night, he would always stand outside the Tang family's villa. When he was sleepy, he would doze off leaning against the door. Until half a month later, Edward came back from a business trip abroad and entered the Tang family's house. In front of him, hearing the bodyguards say, "Miss has given instructions that Mr. Hua can enter. But you can't." He finally couldn't help but lose control. With red eyes he asked me, "Jessica, we were so in love. Have you really forgotten all about it?" I was stunned. The 17-year-old Morton would get up at 5 a.m. to wait for me to go to school, and would patiently explain problems to me. The 20-year-old Morton would start his thank you speech on the podium with my name, and would bend down to tie my shoelaces. On the crowded campus, the 22-year-old Morton would wash my feet every day. When I was pregnant, would cry uncontrollably outside the delivery room, and would hold our daughter all night to coax her to sleep. But the 27-year-old Morton would make me take a taxi home alone at night, would yell at me for another woman, and would deny being Delia's father in front of everyone. It was precisely because I hadn't forgotten our past love that I couldn't forgive him. I asked the bodyguard to drive him away, but 3 days later he appeared at the door again. The bodyguard knew he was Delia's father and didn't dare to really do anything to him. On my phone, Morton kept sending messages. "Honey, I know I was wrong. Please meet me, okay?" It started to rain heavily outside. I looked out of the window under the dim street lights. A man in a black suit stood in the rain, looking steadily at my room. When he saw my figure, a flattering smile appeared on his face. I went out with an umbrella. A lawsuit for divorce would affect the stock price of the Tang family. Persuading Morton to divorce by agreement was the best solution. Seeing me come out, Morton's eyes lit up. "Honey, you're here. I knew you'd come. I've sent Flora away. No one will bother us anymore." Then he took out a little rabbit doll from his arms. and said Delia said she wanted to buy this before. I brought it for her. Can you give it to her for me? The rain was pouring heavily. The man didn't care about sheltering himself from the rain, but tightly protected the doll in his arms with his coat. Delia did say she wanted this, but it was a year ago. At that time, Morton was busy helping John go through the school enrollment procedures and didn't have time to pay attention to her. I took the doll and threw it directly on the ground. Love that comes too late is cheaper than grass. Morton's face turned pale. He forced a smile that was uglier than a cry and said, "Honey, you're still angry, right? Listen to me, I really have nothing with Flora. She's just being sentimental. So she's been trying to stir up trouble between us." I sneered if Morton hadn't given her hope. How could she have the confidence to provoke me? Again and again. She would deliberately call Morton late at night and call him away from home. She would deliberately put photos of her and John in the office, making new employees who didn't know any better think she was the wife of Morton. She would deliberately stick a sign saying, "Flora and John's special car," on the car door to show her sovereignty. All of this was obvious to a 5-year-old like Delia. As the person involved, Morton said he didn't know. He just thought Delia and I couldn't leave him. So he didn't care. I was too lazy to listen to his excuses and turned to leave, saying, "Morton, I'm not here to forgive you. I'm here to make things clear. Stay away from Delia and me. I don't want a lawsuit for divorce. But if you insist, I don't mind seeing you in court." Morton's eyes froze, and the joints of his hands gripping the railing turned white as he said, "Honey, I won't give up the custody of Delia. I'll hire the best lawyer." I paused in my steps and turned to look at him, thinking I was wavering. Morton showed an expectant look in his eyes and reached out to hold my hand, saying, "Honey, you don't want to be separated from Delia either, right? Morton, you forced me to this." I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, saying, "Morton, you're really just like your mother. Willing to do anything." Instantly the man's face turned deathly pale as he said, "Jessica, how could you? How could you? I wouldn't have come to this if I had any other choice." Morton's mother was his taboo. And the main reason. My mother didn't approve of our marriage. Back then his mother was a hostess. When Morton was born, they didn't even know who his father was. But since she had the child, Morton's mother quit that job and started doing odd jobs with her son. Although they didn't have much money, their days were warm and happy. When Morton was 17, he got a chance to participate in a competition. The registration fee and travel expenses added up to a large sum of money. Morton planned to give it up, but the school principal directly called his home. That night many people saw Morton's mother enter a red-lit hair salon on the street. When a fat-eared man came out of the store, Morton was about to rush at him with a dagger. I held him back with all my might. The young man knelt on the ground crying his heart out, just like he was doing at this moment. The man squatted on the ground, holding his face, and sobs came through his fingers, saying, "Jessica, don't treat me like this, please." Morton soon agreed to the divorce and didn't fight for the custody of Delia. I got 80% of the shares of Morton's group. After getting Delia's consent, I changed her surname. Occasionally, some busybodies would tell me news about Flora. Morton gave her a sum of money and asked her to leave City S and go back to her hometown. But she refused. She made several scenes at the company, asking for 20% of the shares of Morton's group, with an outrageous demand. Morton finally saw her true colors, called the police, and even took back the money he had given her before. Flora left in disgrace. After enjoying the life of luxury and wealth, she was unwilling to do an ordinary job. She went around to dinner parties to find rich men. In less than half a year she got sick. As for John, having lost his value of being used, he was directly sent back to his grandmother's home in the countryside. After the divorce, Morton would come to Hong Kong City to visit Delia once a month, hoping to repair their father-daughter relationship. But unfortunately he always returned disappointed. Delia would ask to go home. After being out with him for half a day. And never called him dad. I asked her once. And Delia said that every time she wanted to speak, she would think of what happened at the kindergarten that day. And she just couldn't bring herself to call him dad. After Delia graduated from kindergarten, Edward proposed to me, but I didn't agree. Marriage is like a cage. I just stopped being Mrs. Morton and I don't want to become Mrs. Or right away. I applied for a 1-year suspension of school for Delia and took her to travel around the world. The snow-capped mountains in Lesotho. The aurora in Iceland. The sunset by the Seine River. Listening to the wind, watching the clouds. Little by little healing her wounded heart. I want her to know that the world is so big. And there are so many possibilities in her life. There's no need to dwell on the past. After we came back, I started to take over the Tang family's business. People said that my father was senile. And had handed the company to me. A pampered young lady. Until I exposed several senior executives who had embezzled money by abusing their power. At the shareholders' meeting. On this ground, I removed a group of high-level officials. Then, with my years of experience living in CDs, I launched new products and quickly occupied the market. Only then did they realize that I came prepared. In the business world, I would also run into people I knew before. They said that Morton had now completely become a workaholic. Only when my name and Delia's were mentioned would he show some emotional fluctuations. Why bother back then? You were a model family that many people in the circle envied. Yet for someone else's wife and child, you ended up with a broken family. I heard that Delia still refuses to call him dad. I smiled but didn't respond. In my heart I was thinking, the meeting is postponed. And I can't pick up the child again. My father and mother were traveling abroad. So I had to call Edward and ask him for help. He was quite experienced. After picking up Delia, he came to the company after dinner. He sent us home on the way. As soon as we got home, Delia ran upstairs. The child was growing up and liked to be alone. In the yard only Edward and I were left. He was wearing a gray suit today, making him look even more cold and noble. He asked half-jokingly, "Jessica, if I propose now, will you reject me?" I sighed and said, "Edward, I have no plans to get married in the future. I can wait." The man's eyebrows and eyes drooped slightly, and the outline of his side face was hidden in the shadow, making it hard to tell his emotions. "Honey, I'm back. Wake Delia up. I'll accompany her to celebrate her birthday." My mother had also asked me if I really wasn't moved at all. I didn't answer at that time. But at this moment, looking at the man's bitter smile, I blinked and said, "But since you treated me to dinner, maybe you can have a room of your own in the family." The evening breeze in June in Hong Kong City blew by. Under the moonlight, Edward's dim eyes instantly lit up as he said then, "Thank you, Ms. Jessica." The end.